Hello, friends, and welcome to Season 7 of the Future Ready Librarians podcast series, Leading from the Library. This is a podcast for all librarians wherever you are in your journey. It is filled with amazing guests, important topics, and engaging conversations that will inspire, engage, and support all of us as future ready librarians. I am your host, Shannon McClintock Miller. I am the district teacher librarian at Van Meter Community School in Van Meter, Iowa, and serve as the Future Ready Librarians Leader. I have the pleasure of working within my library and school community and also with others around the country and world through Future Ready Librarian events, conferences, consulting, writing, and more. I am honored to bring these voices and the work of others to our podcast and to all of you. Well, today I am so excited to have my friend Carrie Friday on the podcast, and we were at the AASL conference in Florida this last week, and I saw Carrie for just a brief little bit, but I said, you would be perfect to have on the podcast. And so I was so excited to have Carrie say yes when I wrote her today, even though we're tired and we've had crazy days. I'm so happy to have you on our podcast. So we're just going to start, Carrie, by having you introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, my name is Carrie Friday, and I am the media specialist at Melbourne High School in Melbourne, Florida, which is on the Space Coast, so kind of sort of near Kennedy Space Center. We have about 2,300 kids in our school, grades 9 through 12. We're one of the larger high schools in our district. And so we are, about halfway down the state of Florida on the East Coast. And this is my first year in high school as a librarian. I've been a high school English teacher before, but I swapped over from being a middle school librarian over the summer. So I'm having all kinds of fun adventures.
That is so fun. I know when I was just thinking about like the work that you've done and following everything that you have done over the last several years, it's neat that now you're back with your high school kids. And so I'm sure that you're loving that.
It is so fun. I forgot how fun high school kids were until I went back to them. And then I remembered very quickly. And I was like, this is a nice breath.
Oh,
I mean, I liked my middle school kids a lot. I didn't have any problem with middle school kids, but it's just different. It's just different. But I was ready for a change, and so it's been a good one. And I get to be with my daughter, which I love so, so much.
that's the best. I got to be with my kids, and like Hagen, he's now in college. So it's a little bittersweet last year and this fall going back to school, but how neat to be with your own kids. There's nothing like that, right?
It's so special.
It is. Well, I love the topic that we're going to talk about. And another thing, when I wrote Carrie today, there were like a lot of things that I thought that we could talk about. But the topic that Carrie wanted to focus on, and I love this title, is, but that would never work because, but what if it does? And I think that you are the perfect person to talk about because I love what you do around reading and just the things that you do in the library to get the kids in your library. And especially now that you're now back in a high school and you're the new librarian and all of the fun things that I've seen on social already this fall. This is a great thing to talk about today. And so just start out by telling us a little bit about what that means to you.
So I've always been somebody that was willing to try. I just really like to have fun with kids. And so I really thrive when somebody tells me that something is not going to work or it's not possible. That really motivates me. It makes me want to be like, whoa, watch out, move out of the way. Here I come. Let's see what happens. But I was at a low income, high needs middle school, and I just really wanted these kids to be excited about reading. And so I started showing them these great books and they were surprised that we had so many great books. And so, we did a lot of cool things as author visits and reading challenges, and these kids were reading like crazy, even though they would come to us at least 2 grades below grade level, reading. But we were really successful. It worked a lot. And so then I started trying to do some makerspace stuff, and I had no idea how to use any of these things. I just opened the boxes and put them out on the tables, and the kids loved it. And so then I started figuring out kind of, okay, well, you could do this with that, or you could do that with this. And so then that really worked. But one of the things that I've encountered throughout my career is that people ask me, oh, well, how did you do this? And then I tell them, and then they say, oh, well, that would never work at my school because. And so they would tell me why. And then I'd say, oh, well, you could try this, or you could try, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And I've presented, at state conferences and some national conferences and some different things. And I'll talk about some of the things I'm doing in my program. And then people will raise their hand at the questions part, and they'll be like, well, how do do this or that or the other? And so I answer them, and they say, oh, well, that'll never work. That'll never work. But like, it did work. And so I was really excited to make my transition to high school, because for years and years and years, I've been hearing people tell me that kids won't come to the library in high school, and that the teachers won't come to the library in high school, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And it's not the same, and it won't work. And I just thought, like, there has to be a way. And maybe it's not what I want to try, but there has to be a way to get these kids in there. There has to be. And so that has really kind of reignited my imagination to try to find all the different ways that I could work to get these kids in this space, because the collection had not really been updated in 60 years. It's so gross. And everything was a sea of beige. And the kids, it was not a very warm and welcoming environment. And so the kids were not coming at all. And on the 5th day of school, I had 200 kids in there at lunchtime, just because I said yes when they asked me if they could eat in there. I didn't even know if they could eat in there. I just decided that I was going to let them. Let's see how it goes. I didn't promote it. I didn't advertise it. They just started telling each other. And so now I have them. They're there. So I talk to them about things, and I show them all we've been moving a lot of things around and genrifying and doing some dynamic shelving, and really just changing a lot. And so it gives me an opportunity to talk to them every day and say, oh, guess what's new today? Guess what's new today? Guess what we did now? And so they're starting to see these things. And we've already checked out this school year more books in 2.5 months than they did the entire school year last year for high school. And so that's really exciting, because something is working.
Well, you're there, girl. That's what's working. I love it. So when you talk about all these things, I'm sure people are wondering too, like, what are some of the things that people thought would never work that you have been successful at?
So a couple of things. The middle school that I was at, we didn't have access to AR, reading counts. They wanted a program that the kids could do, a challenge. And so we decided to try a 20 book challenge, but we didn't have anything. And so we just created it from scratch. And so we started making these categories, and we just really, we were using our used cars salesman skills to really push it to the kids, and they just started doing it. So then we started finding prizes from the community and different things to kind of encourage them to keep going, and it worked so well. But in that, there were a lot of lessons that we learned, right? And so instead of having little papers that the kids turned in, the next year we switched to a Google form. And then the next year we switched to a Google form that had sections. And then, we kept making adaptations. And one year we thought it'd be a really good idea for them to read a book that was published the year that they were born. And then they would come in and they'd say, "Where are all the books published in 2007?" I'm like, "Everywhere." And I would build all these resources for them and take hours to do it, and they would never use them. And so there were definitely lessons that we learned, but it worked so, so well. And we did it, and it thrived for all 7 years that I was there. Um, I had the opportunity to bring Kwame Alexander to my school, but I had no budget and no money, and very little time. And in 2 days, I just told everybody what our opportunity was. And in 2 days, we'd raised enough money for him to come. And he came, and we had 200 kids in the library, and we shut down the entire school and did like a live video feed. Every kid in the school got to see it. 200 kids got a copy of the book the day it came out, the first stop on his tour. And like, they still talk about it. I get emails from those kids, and they're like, "Do you remember when this happened?" And I'm like, I remember. Do you remember? And so, um, nobody, like, I didn't really even think that we were going to be able to pull that off, but it was worth it to try because I knew how much my students loved him. um a lot of people told me, like, it's going to take a while to get this high school program where it's working. Like, it's going to take time. It's going to take time. And I just don't have time to waste. So I spent a lot of time over the summer, which I usually do not do, but this was a special circumstance. Um, just cleaning up and cleaning out and getting things painted and trying to make things look different enough that when families came in at registration, they could see that something was different. The kids would know something was different. And I mean, I had my whole family involved, but I had volunteers coming. But we were able to clean out 2,000 books that needed to be DCR'd in a week. um we painted, we moved furniture around. I went through 26 cans of spray paint, which was a lot. My husband was like,
Right.
why do we keep buying so much spray paint? So don't worry about it, hun. We're good. It's all good. Um, we have genrefied the entire 20,000 book collection in like a month. We did it in a month and then relocated everything. But I never would have been able to do that by myself. I decided to trust the kids. So I let the kids do it, which was really hard for me because I really wanted to do that, but I let the kids do it. And I still have the ability to move some things around if I don't quite agree with them. But I've learned to ask for help, and like, it's working. These kids are in there all the time, and they're cranky when I'm gone, and we're we're really doing some good things. And so that's exciting.
Yeah, making a difference for them. Well, and I'm sure that people always think, and this is probably one of their questions when they say it won't work, is the funding that you talked about and how you make this programming happen. And so just give us some ways that you have funded these programming ideas. I know that you just got like a ping pong table. And so
I did. Um, I am the most popular lady in school right now, because I have a ping pong table and I have a Lego wall going up. Um, most, not all, but most of the things that I've done, most of the makerspace materials that I've used, most of the books that I've put into the collection, most of the materials, they've all been from different grants that I've written or from the last several years. I've had a lot of success with Amazon wish list.
Mhm.
And so, like, that really surprised me when it worked the first time because I was at a low income school. And so I really had like no expectations. But people in the broader community that I was connected with, they really wanted to help. And so, I put out a list that had 5 copies of all 15 of our state award list books right after the list came out. And within 2 weeks, I had every book on the list, and I just could not believe it. And I thought, well, if this worked, I wonder what else will work. And so then I just, kept trying different things. And like this summer, I knew that I was moving into a library that didn't have any makerspace materials. It didn't have anything for these kids. And I knew I was going to have some budget, but not enough to really like do all the things that I wanted to do. So I made a wish list, and the school shared it on the Facebook page. And then all these teachers that were excited that I was coming, they were sharing it, different people in the community. We've had probably $1,500 worth of stuff show up just from that Amazon wish list. And so at AASL, I got a $3,000 grant to do some makerspace stuff with high school. And so I've really just looked for creative ways to fund it. But I'm definitely not ashamed to go and ask our business partners to help sponsor different author visits, or help me, buy this for the kids or buy that for the kids, or, provide snacks and meals for different events or whatever. I will ask anybody that will listen, because the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no.
Yeah.
But the best that's going to happen is that they're going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's how I fund most of the things, are grants. But now I have a more generous budget. So that's been very exciting. I'm like, I have money that I can spend. What is this? And my principal just laughs at me every time, but it's so exciting.
Well, and that's something too that I'm sure sometimes people think like, that would never work because of their administration. And I come from a district that I have an amazing superintendent and two principals and lots of, everyone, teachers and parents, and are all supportive in our community. And sometimes when I listen to these stories, again, I say, like, what do you have to lose? Like, the worst they could say is no, or helping them like cultivate, those relationships with their administrators. Sometimes this is like that door that you need to not only make these type of things happen, but it's a good segue into making other things happen. And so it sounds like you have the support already from your new administrator. And I think just giving people, our listeners, some tips on how they found that support would be really helpful.
So when I first became a media specialist, my principal at the time, you kind of have to to be successful with things like this, you really kind of have to learn how to read people. And so he really, I knew what his goals were for the program, but he wasn't really somebody that would say yes to things, but he was super ADHD. And so I learned pretty quickly that if I would ask him a question at class change when everything was really crazy, then I would just, it'd be something totally unrelated. And then I would just go do the thing I wanted to do. And he'd come in and be like, oh, did we talk about this? I'm like, yeah, I asked you at class change. Don't you remember? And he would go, oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. And so as he started seeing things, when all these people would come in from the district to do, what I like to call the dog and pony show, he would get to brag, and he'd be like, oh, look what we did. And so I discovered pretty quickly that that was the way to yes with him, was that it's going to make the school look good. It's going to make you look good. And then he went to a different school, and I got a new principal. And that principal, I met with him over the summer. I came in and sat down, and I was like, this is how we do things. This is what happens. This is different than a lot of other programs that you might have seen. And this is how you should be measuring me. And this is, whatever. And bless him, like, he did not know what to do with me. That is a lot. And so he just kind of like let me do my thing. And so I would just run through the front office all the time. Guess what we're doing today? It's going to be so much fun. You have to come. But my administrators have always come through, so they always see. And then once they see it, then they really believe in it, right? They see these kids who have been in the 8th grade for the 4th time, but they're really good at circuitry and they didn't know that they were good at circuitry. And so they see that working. And then one of the things that I learned is I started, every time I would send out like statistics or updates, or, we had a big event coming, I would email our superintendent and our assistant superintendent, our school board members. And I never in a million years thought that they would come, but then they did. And so then they started seeing, and I was like, oh, you came once, you're done for now. And so I would just invite them all the time to everything. And most of the time they couldn't come, but sometimes they could. And so they really started believing in the program. And so that helped a lot. And I post a lot on social media about what we're doing, at school and how much fun it is. And because the library is such a different place now than it was when I was in school. And in today's current climate, like it's really tricky. Libraries kind of get a bad rap, especially school libraries in Florida. It's tricky. And so I just really want people to know what is happening in our space and what the kids are doing and what I'm doing. And I want them to know that, like, I love these kids and I want them to thrive and learn and grow. And I put everything I have into this program. And so that has been kind of how I've done it. And then when I swapped schools, when I was considering the switch, I spoke with the principal and I said, I really need you to understand what my programs look like. And this is how I do things. And if you need somebody that's just going to like test you around and unlock the doors sometimes, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to be a good fit for your school. But if you want this space to be busy and thriving and kids in here all the time, I have a lot of ideas of how we can do that. And so, like, you need to understand before you say yes, that this is what it would look like. And because he had seen what I'd done at these other schools and other things, he was very excited about it. He said, oh, I already know what I'm getting into. And so that has helped a lot because I had support before I ever got there. I've had money reallocated and, okay, well, what else do you need? And get her this and make sure she has this. And, a school that large, we have 4 deans and I've lost count of how many assistant principals and then a principal, and every single one of them has been in my space. Every single one of them comes through and they're excited about what the kids are doing. So when I run up and I say, I want to buy a ping pong table, they don't even ask me why. They just say, okay, where do I sign the paper? And so that it helps because that's crazy. Like, who's going to buy a ping pong table for the library? But I did, and the kids are really loving it. So that is kind of how I've done it.
I think that's great. Well, and if you get their buy-in, and I always tell people, like, I don't think that my superintendent and principals have ever really said like no to things because they know that what we're doing is, in best interest for our library program and for most of all our kids. And so that is so key. And I'm sure that through all of this, you've also had some things that have probably failed. I know I have, when you do things and you think it's going to be awesome, and then you're like, okay, that didn't like go quite as well as planned. And so how do, like, when people are just like making, these jumps and taking like a chance on things, what does it feel like when you've had something that has totally flopped and failed?
So I've had lessons that I've done where I've just been so excited about it and I've run through the office. I'm like, you guys have to come and see this. It's either going to be really awesome or it's going to be really horrible. I don't know which one, but it's going to be one of those. And most of the time it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. And then, you feel like, oh my gosh, this was terrible. Like, this was absolutely terrible. And at the secondary level, I'm lucky because I might teach the same lesson 6 times in a day. And so by the third or fourth one, I'm like, oh, we got to fix this. We got to change it. We've got to make some adjustments. And so you can kind of readjust. One of the and my friends that know me well like to remind me that I have kind of these like grandiose visions and ideas, like I live way up here, and sometimes I need people to kind of like bring me back down and be like, okay, I'm not saying that this won't work, but do you have a plan for these things that might happen? And so I was really convinced that I was going to be able to teach classes at least 3 days a week in the high school library while still having all these kids come in at lunchtime and all these other things. And so when I started trying it, I was not prepared for so many kids to want to come in. During our first lunch, I have probably between 180 and 220 kids every single day in one lunch. I don't have seats for all of them. They're on the floor, they're down the shelf aisles, they're everywhere. And then I have some, in like kind of a separate room in the lobby. And then for the second lunch, it's a little bit smaller. And so I have between 150 and 180 kids in there every day. That's a lot of children.
That's a lot.
So then when you start thinking about, well, am I going to close the library for this lesson? That's a lot of kids to displace. That's a lot of kids who are losing some of the access that they might not have otherwise. So I really didn't want to do that. But I also didn't want to be like, well, you can bring all of your classes except fourth period. I'm not going to teach them. So I thought, well, I can do this. I can make this work. So I put my class that I was teaching in this one corner, and I warned the lunch kids ahead of time, like, tomorrow there's going to be a class in here, and we are in an invisible bubble, and you are in an invisible bubble, and you don't come over here, and I'm not going to go over, and we're going to make this work. And if you can't make it work, then I'm going to close the library and just my classes are going to be in here. And they didn't want to do that because they remember what it was like last year when they couldn't come in. So the lunch kids handle it really well. The class kids handle it well-ish. I can make it work when I'm teaching. It's not great, but I can do it. But I've noticed that when we have other people that are there, like we had a local credit union come, and they were doing a lesson with classes on financial literacy, and it was so great. But they had a really hard time trying to talk to the kids and be loud enough because there were, 175 kids in 3/4 of the room. And like it was a lot for them. They're not trained teachers. And so, even though I was there managing the kids in the space, it was really hard for them. I've seen some other teachers that like the crowds of kids kind of make them want to break out into hives. And so trying to teach that with all those kids is too much for them, and it doesn't work. And I haven't quite figured out the solution yet, other than there's about 20 minutes between the two lunches. And so if I can kind of squeeze down and pare down, we can sort of make it work. Or there's a couple other rooms attached that I can like move everything to, and they can do it there. But then you have to move everything. And so I still don't have the solution for that, but I'm determined to figure it out because I don't want to close. My administration doesn't want me to close, which is great because, you hear a lot about like how the library's closed all the time. And so I don't know. I don't have the solution, but it's worth it to try. It's good for kids.
It's worth it for the kids. And you'll figure it out. I know you will, my friend. I love it. Well, you're such an inspiration and have so many great ideas. And I know if people don't follow you yet, they're going to want to know where to find you online. So tell everybody where they can find you.
I am on Facebook and Instagram and what is formerly known as Twitter, I guess. and my username is super creative. It's Carrie Friday. Um, I worked really hard on that one. Um, our media center has an Instagram page. So my high school media center has an Instagram page. It's at Mel High Media Center, MELHIGH, and then Media Center. And fun fact, my 15-year-old daughter runs the Instagram page for our media center. She's very interested in communications and PR, and so I let her do this to build a portfolio, and she has very strong opinions about it. So she's doing a great job, though. And so when you look through that, you'll see that it's being done by a high school student, but you would never believe it because she does such a great job.
Love that. You'll have to tell her that when my daughter, my oldest one, Brianna, who's almost 30 now, when she was a junior, we had a class in Van Meter, and it was a class that we had with my friends in Philly. So Iowa to Philly, we taught the kids all about, like, this is when we all were getting on social media, and kids were using it and they were blogging, and now Brianna owns her own marketing company. So tell your daughter that. I
I will.
Isn't that amazing? She does,
That
like,
is amazing.
yeah, she's awesome. And so it's worth it. So I love that you have kids involved. You never know what's going to happen. And some of these stories, just inspiring our kids in these ways and giving them these opportunities and taking a risk will be something too, especially our kids in high school, that can open doors for them also in their future. So keep doing what you're doing, my friend. You're
Well,
awesome.
thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I know you'll have people that might have questions, and I'll pop it into the notes from the podcast, and I'm sure you'll hear from some people. So thank you so much, Carrie. And it was great to see you today and great to see you last week too.
Well, thank you for having me.
As always, thank you to all of our listeners for joining us for this episode of the Future Ready Librarian podcast series, Leading from the Library. And a very special thank you to our sponsors, Follett. You make a difference in our libraries, schools, and within our lives and that of our students every day. We appreciate everything you do. I hope you can take what you learned in today's podcast and put it to use within your practice as a future-ready librarian. If I can support you in any way, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram at Shannon M. Miller, or to my email at shannonmcclintockmiller@gmail.com. I am always happy to help. Until next time, friends, keep finding ways to lead within and from your library.